Hi, I'm doing another video. Like I said in past videos, I want all that y'all has for me, so I'm trying to be obedient, so I'll be putting out more videos. The title for this one is called The Counterfeit and Brave Obedience. We know 1 Samuel 15:22, to obey is better than sacrifice. I was going to just do this kind of off the cuff and not have any notes, but I wanted to be able to give you scripture, so I started taking notes, and 8 pages later, I'm going to try to fit this all in. I really don't want my videos to be more than an hour, but I want to get in all that he wanted me to put in, and I'll even be out somewhere and think of something I wish I had put in the notes, but then I don't remember when I get home, so I'll try to address anything that maybe I covered or messed up even on in a later video. You're welcome to comment on the video, agree or disagree. Be like the Bereans, study to show ourselves approved and rightly divide the word. I've said, I'm human. This is coming from a human perspective, but based on my experience. I'm writing a book. I've been writing one since 2013, basically, is when I started on it. And I'll be happy to send those of you who want that book. It's not going to be long. It's an easy read, maybe 50 to 60 pages, based on specifically what Father had shown me. And this is just kind of based off of, I've lost a lot of time. I've wasted a lot of time. I've been distracted, fear of man, like I said in previous videos. So I'm almost done with that book in a day or two, but I didn't want to keep waiting, and I had to do this. Like, I could not do it. I couldn't wait until one thing lines up with another, so it's going to be a little messy, and I apologize for that. I will have to read off my notes a little bit, and I may seem like I'm chasing rabbits, so I'll try to bring everything back around at the end. But again, this is based on my being obedient to what he has told me to do. And he continues to confirm that to me time and again, so I know that I'm at least doing what he would have me do. So again, this is called The Counterfeit and Brave Obedience. This video is my being obedient. When I was in elementary school, I kind of need the backstory a little bit, so this is going to kind of be a progressive story. I remember in elementary school there being like a popular group, and I really wanted to be in the circle. And I got an opportunity because I would hang around with this little girl. I was friends with probably about one person. I was very shy, and she was made fun of for many different reasons. So I'm not going to go into it, but anyway, she was made fun of. And I remember someone coming to me and saying if I would just be mean to this little girl, that I would be in the popular group. And since I just couldn't do that, I was not allowed into the circle. So the enemy kind of used that to say, like, you're never going to be enough. You're never going to be inside the circle. And so having a relationship with Father kind of brought me out of that shyness over a period of time after high school. And so I kind of fit into the circle. So I didn't want to be kicked out of the circle again, because I still felt like doing things that I did wasn't the norm. So that's basically the backstory to this. So I started going to church at 18. If you watch the other video, you'll know that I made a very unwise decision. It was an abortion decision. So after that happened, I got married right away and immediately wanted to be involved in church. Actually, it was because of a couple of wonderful men who came to our apartment shortly after we got married, and I was wearing feety zip-up pajamas, and I was terribly hot but didn't want to get up and change, because I just didn't know, should you get up and change or just stay there and be hot? So I was just sweaty and hot. Anyway, these two men loved us, and I was able to share my decision. So I wanted to go to church and live the Christian life 24/7, eating the Word. I was called a holy roller, fanatic, all kinds of things, which isn't important to our story. Did every Bible study, went to every function, started to feel like I fit in, but then y'all called us out of that church for different reasons, and ended up in another church that I immediately felt like home. For several years we went there, and Father started showing me some things that really didn't line up with what we were being taught. And I went to the pastor of the church and tried to say what I felt like God was showing me. And I'm going to probably just say God at times, but really God is a title, not his name. And I'll go into that in a little bit, why I don't call him just God. I don't call Jesus Jesus. So again, this is my experience. I'm not at any point telling anybody else what to do. I'm telling you, this is why I do what I do. Sometimes people will ask, like, well, why do you do that? And so this is just kind of also my way of saying, like, this is why I do what I do. And we all love Father, and we should all be progressively growing in intimacy with Father. So we might make a decision that we want to live our lives for Yahuwah and Yahusha, that being what you say, God and Jesus. And I'm not telling you what to say. I'm telling you this is why I say what I say. But if we're always just doing the same thing, if it always looks like it looked when we first came to him and made that decision, then we're really going backward. We're not moving forward. So we should all continue to grow, and that's actually in the book. So I'm trying not to overlap what I also would say in the book if you choose to read that. Anyway, so we ended up being on the same page, my spouse and I. We left that church and eventually ended up in an interdenominational, non-denominational church, whichever you want to call it. And we're very happy there, and there ended up being a split. Well, at the same time, Father started showing me some things that, again, were different, and so I'm going to kind of get into that story. In 2009, it's where this all kind of started. I had a bunch of snowmen because I really loved snowmen, and I just felt like internally, not like I didn't hear a voice. I have heard his voice once back in 2001, but in this particular instance, I just felt like I needed to get rid of some snowmen. So I thought, okay, well, I'll get rid of some of my snowmen. And we're not wealthy. I didn't have a ton of snowmen, but I had, been given some, gifted some, and really liked my snowmen. But in 2010, a lot changed for me spiritually. I was teaching at our church at the time. I was teaching girls, 12 to 18-year-old girls, on Sunday mornings. And I was getting my lesson prepared that Saturday night, and sometimes my lessons would be about 20 pages long. In a year and a half that I taught the class, we only made it through Genesis, Exodus, and part of Leviticus. Anywho, I was teaching that night, and it came to my spirit, if you want to say it that way. I heard in my spirit, teach on the origin of Christmas. And per usual, when I would be talking to the Father, I said, well, I don't know the origin of Christmas, so I had to get in the Word and study it. And I went on, the internet and all that, because it's not in the Bible, because it didn't happen until, after we made it a Christian holiday, as opposed to one of his holy days. Anywho, that was 2010, 2 weeks before Christmas. Teach on the origin of Christmas. And so as I studied, I stayed sick for 3 nights. And all of this is in the book, because the book is called Christmas, Why as a Christian I No Longer Celebrate. And it's very good. And I say that to Yah be the glory, because he gave me all of that. I didn't know that. I had to study that out. And some of the stuff I don't even remember writing, and I would go back and read it, and I would be like, wow, I don't even remember that. Or he would take me to scriptures that I wasn't even thinking about, that he wanted me to know about. So anyway, I learned a lot about Christmas. For 3 nights, I was sick at my stomach, and I had a lady ask me once when I prayed, if I'd ever been so burdened that I would be physically ill, and I thought that was kind of weird at the time. But for these 3 nights, I felt sickened. I kept hearing the word abomination, and so I asked Father, like, is it really an abomination? I didn't know at that time. I wasn't raised in church. I didn't start going to church until I was 18. I didn't have a Bible until I was married at 18. So I didn't know much about Yahuwah relationship, what a walk with him looked like, which is kind of why I made that decision. I didn't really trust God at the time, and I'm still learning at 49 to do that. Anyway, I didn't know that Yahushua was not born on December 25th, that's actually the birthday of many false pagan gods. During this time, when I was just going to teach these girls, the Bible in a year, basically give them the overall concept, and then they would kind of know the stories at least. So have some kind of foundation. But I felt like Father wanted me, or I learned that he wanted me to go back and reread it, although I'd already read it before, the canon of Scripture. Go back, and he wanted to show me truth. So even starting on Genesis 1, 29 and 30, I'd always read that as like, oh, he gave us the fruit and the trees and the plants to eat, and he gave the animals the fruit and the trees and the plants to eat. But that was as far as like it went in my brain. And then afterward, this time it was like I was reading things differently, seeing them clearly, and I got it that, oh, we ate the fruit and the trees and the plants, and the animals ate the fruit and the trees and the plants. So we were originally vegetarians until, after the flood, and then y'all allowed us to eat meat because he knew what we would be like, that we're going to do our own thing, but originally. And so he showed me basically, because he asked me one time, he always asked me questions, crazy questions, and I have to like search them out. What did the lion eat on the ark? And I thought, well, I don't know, what do lions eat? Meat, I guess. But no, Noah gathered all the food that they would need. So if the lion when things come back to the way they're supposed to be at the end times, the lion will lie down with the lamb. So how is that going to happen if they're still eating them? I'm just saying, this is, God made me, with this personality to speak to those who, I'm not rocket scientist or anything. I'm just an average Joe, Catherine. But anyway, I didn't know that. And I did know, like, through Sunday school, you learn things like, the poem or the song, the animals went on the ark 2 by 2. Well, when I was reading that, and you read that they went in, male and female, so therefore, yes, 2, but they went in by different numbers, clean and unclean, 7, 1 pair or 7 pairs. So, I mean, that's something to look into. And hopefully this video doesn't make you feel condemned, or, oh, she thinks she's holier than thou, she thinks she's smarter. I'm no smarter, I'm no better. We're all called to something, and this is what I'm called to. And, we ask him at times, Father, give me such a hunger for your word that I don't want to waste my time doing anything else. I don't want to be distracted by Facebook. That's my big thing. I'm not into TV or anything like that, but it's either Facebook or the Word. So I knew I had to do this. There was I could not do it, if that makes sense. So anyway, I was learning all those things, and it was like my mind was kind of blown, and I didn't know, you don't just run off and start telling people stuff. But I did. I was just sincerely mind blown. Oh my gosh, Father, I didn't know this. How did I not ever know this? And so I would try to share with people, and they're like, well, yeah, we knew that, but this is what we do. we know that wasn't his birthday, but this is when we celebrate it. And so I learned a whole lot. I learned about Santa and Molech and Tammuz. The book goes into all that, so I don't want to get into all that. But basically, if we place our children, our first fruits, on the lap of a stranger and have them ask for material items and goods, so idolatry, and here's this false pagan god, Molech, when in the Word, I'll go into that in the book, but in the Word, when the Phoenicians and even the Israelites, others, would sacrifice their children, and even kings did that, sacrifice their first sons. God wants our first fruits. So they would sacrifice their children and pass them through the fire. So there was this big half bull, half iron. So it was like the top part of his body was a bull and the bottom part of his body was this iron furnace. And they would literally pass their children through the fire, which is where we got the fireplace and sitting them on the lap of Santa or Satan, whichever you prefer. I don't really want to get into that so much, as that was what started all of this. This is what made me start digging and searching. And so I say, like, even if you won't read the whole Bible, some people will at least pick up a small book and read it. And so that might, make them interested enough to dig this stuff out for themselves. Don't go by what I say at all. Get in the Word and see what Father tells you, because we're all different. We all have a different walk, and it's His truth. There's only one way. There's either His way or man's way. And we, being man, do things our way and want things our way, and this ain't Burger King. So, anywho, moving on. So, what I learned was, just putting it simply, if there's a God, and we believe there's a God, obviously, except for those, I'm speaking mostly to believers. Hopefully some non-believers will look into this stuff too and say, yeah, but there's a lot of reasons why non-believers aren't believers, because we as Christians do things that may be Christian, but they're not biblical. They're not scriptural. They're man-made. And Yahushua said that all through the Word, and to the Pharisees, who were supposed to be the teachers of the Word, you do many things like this. They were already doing that the whole way from the get-go. So there's God, and He chooses Abraham, who was not a Hebrew. He was a Chaldean of the Chaldeans. Anyway, he was called out of his pagan worship, called from a land. Joshua even talks about it. You'll read about Abraham in Genesis, but he said that Abraham was considered righteous. Abraham was following Yah's ways before Mount Sinai, before it was credited to him as righteousness. He was following God's commands and decrees and instructions before the law was even written down on Mount Sinai. They already knew the laws of Yah, but he had to write them down in stone originally so that people could, pass it on and stuff, which he did with Moses at Mount Sinai. So when we get to Exodus and they're leaving the ways when they're being delivered from Egypt, so when we make it about Yahushua and his salvation, his death, burial, and resurrection, the good news includes Yah's deliverance from Egypt, from sin, from death and guilt and sin. It wasn't just death, burial, and resurrection. It was what Father told me basically, and I didn't have an understanding of what it meant. It's just what he told me, I guess, so that I could look into it. Again, he speaks to you individually, uniquely, how you learn. But he said the Old and the New Testament, or covenant, because he's a covenant God. I discussed that in the book as well. And covenant is so important to God, Yah. It's one word. It's not the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's all one word. He said it's like God and Jesus. You can't separate them. They are one. The word says they are echad, E-C-H-A-D. They are echad. They are one. Jesus said, Yahusha, I'm saying this for you. He says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Everything he did pointed to the Father. Everything we do should point people to the Father. And my pastor at the time said, well, the Old Testament pointed people to Jesus. And I was like, well, so does the New Testament. So basically, it's a renewed covenant. He made it with us one way. And when things don't really work, you make a better way. Well, if he says all through the Old Covenant, I would like to say the first part of the book, he said, there will come a time when I will write it on your hearts. So it's no longer needed to be written on stone, because what they were supposed to have done was God selected this tribe, the tribe of Judah, which Yahusha would then come from, David and, along the line, Yahusha. Sorry, got off track. He chose that group of people, and then he says, these are my holy days, Moedim, divine appointments. So he gave us his special days, days to celebrate, days to meet with him, to have an appointment with him. It's very important. Like, he wants to meet with us. So when we change it and say, no, that was for the Jews, well, that's a man-made word anyway. They were the tribe of Judah, but they were Hebrews. So, and yeah, I might mess some of this stuff up because this is harder than it looks, and go back and search this out. I'm just trying to get it all in. So back then, the way he intended it for it to be, and it even says it in the word, is, the Father passed on all of this to their children, and they passed it on to their children and to their children. That's the way it was supposed to have been. So anytime they assembled, we say church, or church is what we say. But when they would assemble, when the congregation would meet and they would be given the law or reread their law, like when Josiah reread the law, and when they met on Mount Sinai, it was not just Israel. It wasn't just the Israelites that left Egypt. It says there was a multitude that went with them. So I started questioning things like, well, okay, so if those people that believed Moses, because he was a very popular man, people believed in what he was saying, besides just the Israelites, so they left and went with them. So when they're at Mount Sinai and Moses is giving them the law that he's just been given, and we know they created this fake day because Moses didn't come back right away, so they instituted their own feast day, and we see how that turned out. Y'all was not happy about that, obviously. A lot of people were killed, which is what we do all through the Word. He gives us his ways, and then we do things our own way, and he allows things to happen as a consequence of our sin. We return to him. Teshuvah means to return. When we repent, we turn back to him. So he gave them the word, and he said, it's down here somewhere, I'll find it. God is making covenant, Yah is making covenant, Deuteronomy 29:15, both with him who is standing here with us today before Yah, and also with him who is not here with us today. So he was saying, okay, so all these people that are Israel, and then the foreigner and the alien, if they want to be under that umbrella, under that protection, under that covenant, like if people come to our country, we say, well, you have to follow our ways. You have to learn our language. You have to follow our ways. We wouldn't want them we don't want to have to learn their language. I mean, you hear this stuff all the time. So he spoke to the whole community, those that were of Israel and those that were with them, all the sojourners, those that came in even on their trip to the promised land, all that those that would come alongside them or live with them, they expected them to follow those ways. It said the law is the same for the citizen and the foreigner. So there was one law. There wasn't, okay, it's okay if you do your own thing. No, if you want to be under my covenant, under my protection, you will follow my ways. And really, he didn't ask anything that hard. It says that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. It's not a burden. There's nothing in the word that is too hard to do. Now, there might be things that we don't want to do because we want to do something else. I've been guilty of that many times. But he was saying, okay, I'm giving you the law today. This is what I want you to do. You're in covenant with me. You know, we're in covenant with our spouse. We expect things of them, faithfulness and loyalty, and they expect the same for us. So when that doesn't happen, you know, it can cost a lot. It can cost a marriage. And this is what he's saying is, these are my ways. And if you love me, you will do things the way I want you to. But man has always, from Babylon, you know, when they started creating the Tower of Babel, they wanted to be like Lucifer, basically. They wanted to be higher. They wanted to be like God. They wanted to be able to reach God. And we know what happened there. He confused the language and dispersed the people. So I said, with those here today and with those that are not here today, the future generations that haven't even been born yet, their DNA is already there, but they haven't been born yet. So it's speaking to us today. Things didn't change. It's always been God's way or man's way. You get to choose. So the Father would pass it down, but then basically what else Father showed me was the Jews, they do the things that he said to do, but they dropped the ball. They didn't recognize Messiah when he came. And the Christians, we believe in Messiah, but we don't do any of the things that he told us to do. And again, I didn't have an understanding of what any of that meant. That's just how it came to me. So that's what I started looking into. Y'all never intended church to be a place. We say that even. As Christians, I no longer call myself a Christian. I'll kind of get into that. But a lot of things were done in the name of Christianity that, again, aren't biblical or scriptural. Pogroms, I forget the words I'm looking for. The Inquisitions, the Crusades, those were all done in the name of Christianity. But Father never meant for there to be this new religion called Christianity. It was always his ways. He gave us his ways, and man just creates all these things. I read somewhere today that Christianity was the last invention of the pagans. I don't remember, so I don't want to, not a direct quote. Anyway, so they had to assemble. So they congregated. They had an assembly. They assembled to receive instruction. So they assembled at Mount Sinai and for important things. In Joshua chapter 8:34, Joshua copies and reads all the words of the law to the whole assembly, including women, children, and foreigners. All of them. And Yah tells us to obey his commands, all through his word. We say the law is done away with, but Abraham trusted Yah and obeyed his commands. And I kept adding things to my notes. So like I said, most people that know me know I hate to write anyway, and so it's kind of actually hard for others to read my scribble. So I keep adding stuff, so I might mess up a little bit in that area, but, you know, bear with me. Romans 4, 18 through 22, talking about Abraham. He did not waver in unbelief, but grew strong in faith, giving glory to Yah, being assured God was faithful to his promise. Therefore, it was credited to him as righteousness. So that's Romans 4:18-22, and it's still giving us examples of Abraham and why it was credited to him to its righteousness. You know, we sing this song, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Yahusha than to trust and obey. And I'm not being a smart aleck or snarky or anything like that. I say Yahusha. I'll explain that. So I'm just saying Jesus because we're used to saying Jesus, and that's how the watcher is going to know him, or most people. So even in Romans, it's telling us we say trust and obey, but we only want to obey what we say we want to obey. We say, oh, you're picking and choosing, but in actuality, you're picking and choosing because this is the whole word. And so, you know, you start questioning these things, and that's really what I want to get across is question things. Don't just, that's the whole premise of that book. Don't just do things because of tradition or because it's the way our mom taught us or dad, whatever. Or my pastor said blah, blah, blah. Or, well, I learned that in church, blah, blah, blah. And you didn't grow up in church, so you don't know, and I do. Nobody's been mean about that. I'm just saying, just because we've always done something that way or it's tradition doesn't make it right. A lot of people never question anything. They just, you know, you're wrong. You have to be wrong. I don't even want to hear it. I'm just saying, ask questions. Find out why you do what you do. What if other people know these things and that's why they don't want to believe? Because they know we look just like the world. We may go to church on Sunday, which wasn't the original Sabbath anyway, but not getting into all that. But just because we do something doesn't mean that it's right. Even if we're sincere, we could be sincerely wrong. I could still be sincerely wrong in some of the things that I do. There have been things like I used to tell my neighbor across the street, and hopefully she'll see this, she had this huge evergreen in her front yard, huge, and I would say, oh, let me buy the ornaments and come over and decorate your tree for you. And she didn't do Christmas for other reasons at the time. And she's like, no, it's thanks, it's okay. And what's funny is she says I'm the one who actually led her to Christ, and here I was trying to get her to bring an Asherah pole into her home, which I'll discuss too. So we see all through Romans, and again, I probably forgot where I was going on things, but there's one way, and it's God's way. It's Yah's way. And so Abraham, all through the people that we read about, yes, we all make mistakes. I mean, David, you know, had an affair and had Uriah killed and slept with Bathsheba, and, you know, there was grace even then. We say, you know, grace came through the New Testament. Well, there was grace for Abraham when he lied about Sarah being his sister. There was grace when David and Bathsheba had an affair and their baby died, but y'all allowed them to have other children. David cried out. He repented before Yah. He wept about his sin. So Abraham was counted, it was credited to him as righteousness because he trusted Yah. He believed in that promise before he ever saw it, but he also obeyed, and that's what God wants for us to do. And I've even seen t-shirts, false propaganda. I could even name the store now, it came to my mind, that people wear, young people wear, and it says obey. Everything that y'all created, there's a counterfeit to. But we never look at any of those things. We all just think, oh, you're making something out of nothing. But he told us to obey. Obey my commandments. There's life in it. You know, when I made the decision that I made at 18, there was death in that decision. I wasn't obedient. I didn't trust y'all. And that's why I do this, because I trust him now. I mean, I'm sick at my stomach just sitting here doing this. But I trust y'all. I no longer fear man. You got to get over it, you know. Genesis 26:5, because Abraham obeyed my commandments and did everything I required of him, keeping my commands, my decrees, and my instructions, he was considered righteous. And then, like I said, some of these notes I've added on the side, so I may have already said something. Matthew 15:3 says, we nullify the word of Yah with our traditions. In Isaiah, they were doing the things he said do, like obeying Shabbat and bringing him sacrifices and all that. But because we do evil things, he won't even be listening when we pray. It says that in the Word. Like, none of this is going to be my words. It's all the Word. Isaiah 29:13, they honor me with their lips, worship of rules taught by men. Matthew 15:3-9 shows hypocrisy of those who say they know Scripture, but made up their own rules. Yahushua says the same thing in Isaiah. He's saying to the Pharisees that what Isaiah said, he was talking about you, those in Matthew, the Pharisees. So even though some people have said, see, that's Old Testament, everything that's in the Old Testament is mirrored in the New Testament. And so in the book, there's several examples of the Old being mirrored in the New, the renewed. And Yahushua even says, like, that's all they had. Yahushua and the disciples, they had the Word was the New Testament, or the Tanakh, the Torah, the first five books, and the writings and the prophets. So that's what they went by. So I don't understand why right after Yahushua died, like, all that was negated. He even said, and I'll share about that in a minute, but I took down this verse. I think it's John 8:44. I don't have it written down. No lie has its origin in the truth. So if we say, well, that's not, we know it wasn't that, but this is what we do. So if that's a lie, if you know that his birth wasn't in the dead of winter, when the roads would have been difficult to travel, and many other things, and the shepherds weren't out in the fields by night, that's all in the book, how can you say that's truth, or that we're being taught the whole truth? So when y'all brought me out of this church that I did feel like family at, and I love that church, I don't regret anything that I've been through or done or whatever. Wherever I've been, I felt that's where I was supposed to be at the time. But he started showing me these things, and I took it to the pastor like I was supposed to, and I allowed him to believe that he had set me straight, so to speak. But in my spirit, I was unsettled, and I just wanted to run, because no, that's not what Father's showing me. And so I got into this church where I knew where he wanted me to be after that, and I loved it and was very happy there. But again, he started showing me these things that were contrary to what I knew at that time, and that's difficult. And so I started kind of teaching about that, and the pastors were very nice and never kicked me out. Like, I've heard some stories, people calling you witches or heretics or Judaizers or other things. Did ask on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how important is it to get your point across? And at the time, being fearful of man, I said 3. And my husband said, like, no, 10, because there was a difference. I can't tell you what to do, but I have to be obedient in what he's telling me to do. And so that's all I say is, get in the Word from beginning to end. The best parts, I can tell you the best parts, Genesis to Revelation, those are the best parts. Get in the Word, and I wish that we had enough time. Who knows how much time we have left? We know things are escalating quickly. But I pray that we each would have enough time to read the Word all the way through and see if we're doing things our way or his way. We don't have that much time, and I pray that Father escalates his Word in us even more so than the things going on in the world. Fast tracks us. That's what I usually say. I pray that he fast tracks us so that it doesn't take anybody 10 years to learn this stuff. That they'll ask Father about it and say, is she crazy, or is she telling, this is all truth. I'm not saying anything. I might mess up because I'm human and, I didn't write it down right or whatever. The other day I was telling somebody about a dream I had, and I gave them scripture. Well, I'll just tell you about it. I woke up, it was the middle of the night, and there was a little bit of light peeking through, but it was bright enough that I was thinking it was 5:30 or 6 in the morning. But I look over at the clock and it was 3:33. So I just knew, I don't know how I knew, I just knew that it meant I was to go read Jeremiah 3:33. So I didn't have my Bible in there. I just picked up my phone with the Bible app on it, and I, of course, went to 3:33 first, and Jeremiah 3:33, and there were only 25 verses in Jeremiah 3. So, of course, that meant I needed to go to 33:3. So I did that, and that was when Father said, the Word said, call to me, and I will show you many matters that you didn't know anything about. And so I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, Fortunately, I got up right then and wrote it down. And then later, while I was researching for this, he told me to go to Jeremiah 20, and that's when he said, put all of these things that I'm showing you into a book. So those are just instances of, ways that he's spoken to me and how he talks to me specifically. I've actually been in prayer, here's being transparent, been in prayer at times and said, well, Father, how come you don't speak to me when I'm in prayer? How come I never, feel like you're saying anything to me in prayer? And, to step on my toes, unfortunately, he said, well, I can usually find you on Facebook. That's pretty sad. Anyway, so moving on. Ezekiel 22:26, her priests profane my holy things. They don't teach clean and unclean. So I've actually, this is me coming out again in a big way, but I feel like he said, if I will do this, he will give me even more. And that's kind of what he did after the last one. I wasn't brave enough really to say that I'd had an abortion, but he gave me that courage. And so he's given me the courage to do this. I know I'm going to mess up, and I have all these notes and so many things that I want to say, but I couldn't keep waiting until it was perfect to do it. I needed to just go ahead and do it and be okay with messing up. So I have probably meant to say this at the end, but I'll go ahead and say it. I had to make the decision. Do I continue to go to a church on Sundays when I didn't feel that's really what the Father wanted us to do based on His Word? But I loved being in fellowship. I loved singing. That's the way I connect with y'all. I wanted to be a part of that, but I struggled because it was contrary to what His Word says. In the first church, when they congregated or assembled, it was in homes. It was groups. There wasn't one person giving the word, telling everyone what to believe or what they got from it, which is sometimes great. And I've been at church, and I'll be listening to the pastor, and I'll get so excited, and I'll be like, he's right there, and then nothing. And I'll be like, you were so close. You were just almost there. And then even sometimes when we're singing, no matter how you feel about that in church or whatever, we would be almost right there, and then we would cut it off like we had a set, you got to do this, have a 3-point message, and you got to be out in time for lunch. Oh, that was my other thought a while ago that I left off. I question things like, okay, if we say the 10 Commandments, we still follow the 10 Commandments. But we've done away with the law, which is part of His commandments. So if we say it's okay that we change Shabbat, Sabbath, to Sunday worship because of Constantine in 321 AD and the Council of Nicaea and all that stuff, which is in the book, even if that's okay, well, the Word, if we're reading it, says, you're to do no work. You're to have, not even your servants are doing to work. Only thing you do is, all the work that you would do is to eat, you got to feed your animals. They have to eat. You have to eat. But other than that, you rest. And he gave us that day for rest. And I know all the scriptures, so don't say, what the new covenant, renewed covenant says about it. If they had rested, anyway, I struggled with that. I struggled with, do I stay in the church where, like, I'm going to be being subversive if I say, well, I don't believe in this, or like I believe this, or I do this, because God convicted me in 2010. I would go get groceries and stuff on Saturdays, and y'all convicted me to stay home and be in the Word and not look like the world. And what does the world look like on Saturdays? You're buying and selling. You are, crazy traffic. And if I happen to, once out of 10 years, have to go to town for something, or go to the stores or whatever, and I would see the craziness and the stuff, and it would remind me, like, why I'm so thankful that I'm at home and in the Word. And there are good things that you can be doing. I used to pray about, well, Father, do you want me to go to the abortion clinics and try to talk to the girls before they go in, or even after, or try to convince them not to do it, that they'll suffer and you don't want them to suffer. So there are good things, but that can be done on another day too. What best thing is there to do than be in His Word and in prayer and taking that time to have intimacy with Him that we can't, you can do that on the other days, but He said that's His sign, that's His covenant sign with us. That's His mark, the tav, that's His mark. We are a cod. He wants to be a cod with us, face to face, panimo panim. He wants us in that face to face place with Him. Who wouldn't want that? Anyway, where was I? I'm sorry. But I would ask, like, well, even if changing the day is okay, like, why are we still running right to lunch? Why are all the churches letting out and everybody runs straight to lunch? That's still causing someone to work. So, like, why is there always a discrepancy in what we all, believe? Grace and truth, I talked about that. Grace was shown to David and Abraham. Before, we would have been killed. That's grace right there. We would have been killed in the past for the things that we do now. That's certainly grace. Father's loving us and sparing us, and forbearance, His patience, and He knows right where we are. My friend, and again, I'm getting off my notes, but a friend was just sharing a story with me yesterday that these women in this other country, they're prostitutes. But when they come to the saving knowledge of, when they make a decision to follow Messiah, they don't know what we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do. They don't know any of that. And they send them out right away to tell others the good news. And so they're prostitutes, but they spread the word too, without knowing that they shouldn't be prostituting, because that's the only way they know to feed their families. And women over there are seen as nothing. And so, they might be raped, they might be killed. They know that they might not go home later that day. They might not make it home. But they're so zealous that they share the word, knowing that it could cost their lives. We don't see that here. We've been pretty much left to our own devices, unfortunately. We haven't been shown that much persecution. We haven't suffered much persecution. We have a little bit, but not really. I mean, we're not dying because, we're at church at this point. But maybe it's because we look just like the world. I think she might have even been telling me, or else I saw it on another friend's page, Facebook page, about, it was her, yeah. And I'm sorry that when she sees this, she's going to see that I messed all these stories up. But she was relaying it to me, and I'm just relaying it to you, not as well. But that this missionary, I think they came here and she wanted to go home because she was too comfortable here. Things were too easy. She said she was getting sleepy here because other than going to church on Sundays, we look a lot like the world. So that's kind of an eye-opener. Joshua 24:2 also talks about Abraham, if you want to look that up, that God called him out of idolatry. His family